Dr. Clarissa von Spee from Cleveland. Dico subito, lei tiene la sua conferenza in inglese e ho preparato una traduzione in italiano, ok? Se qualcuno vuole, può prendere proprio qui la copia. Bene, all'inizio vorrei proprio presentare, lo farò in italiano, così la nostra relatrice. Lei è proprio direttrice del Dipartimento Asian Art al Cleveland Museum of Art. È stata anche curatrice delle collezioni cinese e centro-asiatica al British Museum da 2008 a 2016. Ha insegnato anche storia dell'arte dell'Asia orientale alla Università di Heidelberg da 2005 a 2008, dove noi ci siamo anche incontrate. La dottoressa von Spee ha studiato a Heidelberg, a Parigi e a Taipei. Ha conseguito il dottorato di ricerca presso la Università di Heidelberg. Ha curato diverse mostre, così per esempio The Printed Image in China from the 8th to the 20th centuries e una cosa molto recente, per esempio China Southern Paradise, Treasures from the Lower Yingyang Delta. Le sue pubblicazioni, per esempio, una importante Wu Hufan, a 20th Century Art Connoisseur in Shanghai. Adesso vorrei, forse per le persone che sono nuove qui in questo ambiente, siamo qui nel forum e questo forum è proprio dedicato a arte e religioni. Così incontrare le religioni nello spazio d'arte. Così al centro del nostro percorso qui, devo dire tanti saluti del professore Ambrogio Giovanni, buon Giovanni, purtroppo stasera non poteva essere presente per questo. Sì, ci sono io. Allora, che cosa abbiamo come focus? Abbiamo sempre questa idea dell'arte come spazio, ma come un spazio proprio di conoscenza del mondo o di Dio o di se stesso. Così veramente di comprendere nelle diverse culture questo spazio d'arte. E abbiamo sempre un quasi duplice incontro, una conferenza come oggi, in cui alla fine possiamo fare le domande in inglese e in italiano, e abbiamo la settimana prossima un incontro specifico per gli studenti, ma anche per quelli che fanno la ricerca, un laboratorio in cui lei, la dottoressa Clarissa von Spee, sarà presente a Roma. Così abbiamo anche la possibilità di fare le domande, di discutere con lei qui a Roma. Adesso il tema è arte cinese, la religione, le religioni in Cina e lei ha questo triplice approccio, confucianesimo, il taoismo e il buddismo, ma il buddismo quasi come una religione straniera introdotta in Cina dall'India. Abbiamo già avuto un incontro sull'arte del buddismo. Adesso non voglio perdere il tempo, lascio subito la parola a Clarissa von Spee. I'm very happy that you could come and you could participate at this event as an expert of China, of Chinese art. And yes, I let you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yvonne. Do you hear all? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Cleveland. I'm delighted and grateful to have been invited to be part of this forum, Inter Religiosi. Today's lecture is about religions in China, in which we will explore how those religions are manifest and find expression in the arts. Like in other cultures, in historic China, religion and beliefs were a major driving force for the production of the arts. Chinese use the term sanjiao, the three teachings, for their three main belief systems. Those are Confucianism and Taoism, two native philosophies. The third teaching is Buddhism, a foreign religion, introduced from India to China. The founders of all three belief systems lived in the 6th to the 4th centuries before the Christian era, during the lifetime of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Oh, it doesn't move forward. Oops, yeah, sorry. Unlike Christianity, Islam, and Judaism in China, we often find these religious or belief systems practiced in coexistence or complementing each other. Since about the 11th century, there is a saying that the three traditional teachings are one, Sanjiao, Yijiao. The meaning of this is visualized in paintings that show the three founders of these teachings, Lao Tzu, Confucius, and Buddha Shakyamuni, together, sometimes assembled around a pot of vinegar, as you can see on the right. Upon tasting the vinegar, Confucius finds it sour, Buddha bitter, and Lao Tzu calls it sweet. Before we will discuss the three teachings today, Confucianism, Taoism, and Chinese Buddhism, we will first look at Neolithic and ancient China. The Chinese, like the Egyptians, believed in an afterlife. When a person died, his two souls, the Hun and the Po, separated. The Hun soul would become a spirit and leave the physical body, while the Po soul would reside with the physical remains. If these souls are not properly cared for or accommodated in the afterlife, they may turn into malicious, homeless ghosts and cause havoc among the living descendants. These two fantastic and fiercely looking creatures made of pottery illustrate this belief. They once guarded the entrance to an 8th century stately tomb. The menacing appearance of these sculptures warded off evil spirits from the outside. At the same time, they prevented that the soul or spirit of the tomb occupant would leave the tomb and enter the world of the living. Almost everything we know about ancient China today is concluded from excavated burial sites that were constructed to assure the deceased is provided with everything necessary for a comfortable afterlife. The way how the Chinese prepared for the afterlife and how they worshipped their ancestors changed throughout the dynasties, but the belief in a spiritual connection with the ancestors is still alive today. For example, on Qingmingjie, the day to remember the dead, comparable to our All Saints' Day, Chinese visit the graves of their families. They sweep them, burn incense, and lay down fruit and flowers. Or, during the Lunar New Year celebrations, some families may still hang up an ancestor portrait or place an ancestor tablet with the name of the deceased family member on the house altar to call their spirits and to nourish and worship them. But let us start chronologically. Elite burial sites of Neolithic settlements from the 4th and 3rd millennium BCE in today's Southeast China have brought to light a staggering amount of jade objects. The most common form that was found are round bead discs that were placed on the chests of the deceased, along with square cylindrical tubes. Their precise meaning in burials and accompanying rituals remains unknown. But these large plain discs and squared cylindrical tubes formed an essential ritual pair and were of spiritual importance. The use of the material jade, also called nephrite, is noteworthy. Jade is almost as hard as a diamond and very difficult to work. Its durability rarity, and hardness made it become a symbol for immortality. Let's move forward in time towards the historic Shang and Zhou dynasties in the second to first millennium before the Common or before the Christian era. In 1976, the burial site of Lady Hao, the consort of the Shang dynasty king Wu Ding, was discovered and excavated. Her tomb is one of the few graves that had not been looted in earlier dynasties and was still intact when found. Lady Hao lived in the second millennium BCE, around the 1200 BCE, so 3,000 years ago. She was a powerful general who led successful military campaigns. Besides military leadership, she held a prominent position in performing important sacrificial rituals. The majority of artifacts in her tomb were bronzes and jade ritual objects, unique to Chinese art and culture. Ancient bronze vessels were used in banquets, burials, and rituals, held to worship the ancestors, and they were the most precious objects in the religious and political life of the day. Lady Hao's tomb chamber was found 7.5 meters below the surface and contained 210 ritual bronze vessels. Written sources make clear that the ceremonial banquets and ritual meals in honor of the ancestors were of utmost importance. We do not learn anything about the liturgy and religious beliefs, but the shapes and variety of the bronze vessels convey that they were used to prepare and serve meals. There is a clear separation between vessels for alcohol from fermented grain and those for food, meat that included meat and grain. Like Chinese food today, a meal offered a variety of courses. And on the right, the square funding is the square bronze vessel is for meat, and the center and left one are wine vessels. If we consider that precious metal could potentially be made into weapons and tools, it is astonishing how many bronzes were sacrificed and buried with the ancestors. This in turn is an indication for the importance of these rituals and the sacrifices to the ancestors in ancient China. The rituals were performed to ensure the goodwill of the ancestors to benefit the living descendants, and they were part of a religious context. Over time, Shang to Zhou dynasty ritual customs changed. We can observe an enormous shift from wine vessels to food vessels. Zhou dynasty texts, in fact, mention that the previous Shang dynasty fell because the rulers indulged in too much alcohol. Music also played an important role. Whole sets of bronze bells were found. So you have a single bell on the left and the whole set on the right. Let us have a look at one more archaeological excavation in China, the Terracotta Army, a spectacular find. The discovery of the Terracotta Army indicates a shift in the sacrifices and a change in the belief in the necessities for the afterlife. While Shang dynasty burials still contained many skeletons and sacrificed animals and humans, the tomb of the first emperor of China contained many animals and figures made of clay that substituted these sacrifices. This means that replicas were seen as effective as real things or living beings. The Terracotta Army is evidence of this belief. The Terracotta Army was discovered by farmers in 1972 in Shanxi province, some 35 kilometers east of the city of Xi'an. The army made of clay is situated in the northeast of the emperor's main burial site, which is a tumulus of the size of a mountain. So you see the mountain in the photograph on the right. That's the tomb of the emperor. The emperor's tomb has not been opened to this day. We do not know what it contains. The whole necropolis spans 56 square kilometers and has many satellite tomb sites. And on the left, you see a plan with the terracotta army on the right, and the brown square is the tomb of the emperor. The terracotta army is situated about 1 kilometer away from the main tomb. Facing away from the tomb, the army marches east to effectively protect the emperor for eternity. During the lifetime of the emperor, the east had not yet been pacified, so potential danger and attacks would in fact come from there. The army comprises around 7,000 over life-size figures that carried real bronze weapons. Today, about half of the terracotta army is excavated. The first emperor was one of the most powerful men in Chinese history. Originally the king of the state of Qin, he defeated competing neighboring states and unified them in the year 221 BCE. Upon which he called himself Qin Shi Huangdi, first emperor of Qin. The name of his empire Qin is said to have given its name to China. Qin Shi Huangdi standardized weights and measurements, the axle length of cards, coins, and currencies. He unified the script system and thus unified the whole empire. In addition, Qin Shi Huangdi began already to construct the Great Wall in order to protect his empire against invaders from the north. Other pits on the necropolis contained musicians, court entertainers, and animals in clay and bronze, placed in artificially constructed settings to ensure the emperor could continue to enjoy entertainment, hunting, and banqueting in his afterlife. Before we discuss some select works of art reflecting aspects of the three teachings, let me introduce you briefly to the partly historic, partly legendary founding figures of Taoism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. All three teachings developed before the Christian era in the 6th to the 5th centuries and are practiced to this day. Followers of these three teachings venerate different founding or cult figures and have their own centers and temples for worship. Taoism can be traced to two foundational philosophical texts. The first is the classic of the way, the Tao Te Ching, attributed to the sage Master Lao, Lao Tzu. The book is a collection of about 80 short prose poems addressing key concepts of Taoist philosophy, that is, living in harmony with the natural order, the Tao, seeking self-cultivation, and longevity. The second text is the Zhuangzi, a compilation of anecdotes attributed to Zhuangzhou, or Master Zhuang. Both compilations of texts build the foundation for a diverse philosophical and religious tradition. The founding of Taoism is said to have been driven by the idea of an ideal kingdom in which its inhabitants live in peace and harmony with nature and the rhythm of the seasons. The legendary Lao Tzu is traditionally depicted as a sage, riding an ox. However, over time, Taoism, in competing with Buddhism, developed into a more organized religion. That happened during the 2nd century, during the Han Dynasty, and it included the building of temples and a hierarchical priesthood. While Taoism never became a monolithic church in a Western sense, here on the right, you see an 8th century sculpture depicting the sage Lao Tzu as a deity inspired by Buddhist sculpture. So Lao Tzu is really depicted like a Buddhist figure, or the Buddha. Confucius, Kung Qiu, or Master Kung, was a Chinese philosopher, teacher, and statesman whose teachings focused on the importance of moral virtues, social harmony, and ethical conduct as fundamental elements of a respectful, fair, and well-ordered society and state. Growing up in humble circumstances during times of political upheaval, his mother encouraged his education and learning. In his initial minor roles as an official, Confucius developed a vision and gained a reputation for ruling through virtue. It is said that under his administration as a local magistrate, the area transformed into one where things left on the sidewalk would not vanish, and doors need never be locked. When his disciple Zhigung once asked him, what is Ren, or a benevolence, or humaneness, however you wish to translate it, Confucius replied, it means don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself. Furthermore, Confucius propagated ethical conduct and self-cultivation and taught his students, if you guide the people and keep them in line through threats of punishment, they will try to stay out of trouble and keep them in line. Out of trouble, but they will have no sense of shame. If you guide them with exemplary virtue and keep them in line with the practice of the rituals, they will develop a sense of shame and will know to reform themselves. While rulers throughout the country welcomed Confucius at their courts, most of them nevertheless chose war over peaceful interaction and diplomacy. However, Confucius continued his teachings and gained hundreds of students and followers, who over generations recorded the master's life and sayings in a set of writings called the Analects, the Lunyu. Long after his death, by the 2nd century, his concept of governing through virtue and upright behavior and through observing the rituals became state ideology. His teachings, preserved in the Confucian classics, became part of the civil service examinations. By that time, the historian Sima Qian called him the ultimate sage. Today, Confucius is considered China's first teacher who advocated for an education for all and established teaching as a vocation. Confucianism, with its emphasis on social harmony, ethical behavior, and filial piety, has profoundly shaped East Asian cultures, influencing everything from government and education to family structures and interpersonal relationships, particularly in China, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. Siddhartha Gautama, also known as Shakyamuni Buddha, is the historical Buddha whose teachings form the foundation of Buddhism that was introduced from India to China around the 1st century. Siddhartha Gautama was a prince of the Shakya clan in present-day Nepal, who, according to legend, grew up privileged and protected, realizing the fleetingness of life and existence. He renounced his life and became an itinerant ascetic, as depicted in this sculpture here on the screen. It is said that after having meditated for 49 days under a Bodhi tree in what is today called Bodh Gaya, India, he achieved enlightenment or Buddhahood a state of mind that perceives reality as inherently empty. The Buddha's teachings and discourses were transmitted by his disciples and followers in texts such as the sutras. However, as you will have a separate lecture on Buddhism, the focus of this lecture will be on Chan Buddhism, or in Japanese, Zen Buddhism, a branch of the popular Mahayana school. In China, Chan Buddhism began with the Indian monk Bodhidharma, or Bodhidharma, in the 6th century, whom you see here, depicted here. The tradition flourished during the Tang and Song dynasties at the 10th to the 12th century, when it really flourished. Chan means meditation, and the school emphasizes sudden enlightenment over or versus the reading of scriptures, dogma, and rituals. Unconventional teaching and a close student-teacher relationship is crucial. Chan Buddhism teaches that spiritual awakening or enlightenment can be achieved in ordinary daily life activities through simple actions, such as mending one's clothes in the sunshine, which you see here on this painting. Legend has it that upon his arrival in China, where Bodhidharma wanted to introduce his new doctrine, he was granted an audience with Emperor Wu of the Liang dynasty, who was a devout Buddhist. But the meeting did not go well. Later texts state that Emperor Wu had asked the great teacher Bodhidharma, "What is the first principle of the holy teaching?" Bodhidharma said, "Vast emptiness, nothing holy." When the emperor asked the patriarch how much merit he, the emperor, had gained for having built temples and given financial support to monastic communities, Bodhidharma replied, "None whatsoever." Whether this is apocryphal or not, Chan Buddhism distinguishes itself by its emphasis on direct experience and intuition. Rigid, paradoxical questions or statements between student and teacher were used as means for meditation, to break down thinking patterns and encourage students to move beyond logical reasoning. So when the patriarch realized that the emperor did not understand his mission, he left the court to move on, and finally he settled in the Shaolin Monastery in Henan province. On his way north, he is said to have crossed the Yangtze River on a reed, and this is what you can see in the painting. So Bodhidharma is riding on a stalk of reed or a bamboo, branch of bamboo, and this is a moment when he crosses the Yangtze River. Today, the Shaolin Monastery is still a center of Chan Buddhism, but better known as a Kung Fu martial arts school. Bodhidharma established Chan Buddhism there in the 6th century and introduced physical training regimen to the monks, emphasizing that physical health would support their spiritual practice. I'm returning to this painting as it is an important example of Chan Buddhist art and an expression of its concept that all images are illusory. Bodhidharma is sketched in few pale brushstrokes that almost fade away and are only darker to accentuate the figure's frowning mouth and eyes, expressing the patriarch's dissatisfaction over the failed meeting with the emperor. The minimalist, dilute, and swift lines on an empty ground emphasize the Chan idea that the truth cannot be grasped in words, images, or through logic. Or, in the words of Bodhidharma, there is no noble truth. There is only emptiness. Let's return to Taoism and its emphasis on nature and sacred landscapes. Inspired by Taoism, one of China's greatest cultural achievements is landscape painting. Landscapes are seen as images of the universe, reflecting nature's dynamic, ever-changing forces, the Tao, the fundamental principle of life and source of all existence. Remote islands, mountains and grottos, so-called cave heavens, Dongtian, were believed to be the sacred dwelling places of immortals and gateways to realms with unique spiritual energy. Thus, Taoists seek nature or pursuits that connect them with nature in order to achieve spiritual transformation, self-cultivation, rejuvenation, and longevity. A good visualization of the Taoist concept of the universe and the human place within it are so-called mountain censers, Woshan Qianglu, of the Western Han Dynasty. This censer on the right, made of bronze, has a central shaft that holds a bowl for incense, and it bears a conical cover that is shaped as a miniature mountain. The shaft and bowl feature water and waves in gold inlay, indicating that the mountain emerges from the sea. Wild beasts, plants, and figures, here seen on another example, indicate remote lands, such as islands in the oceans, where immortals were believed to dwell. The censer reflects an image of the Taoist concept of the cosmos, with mountains emerging from the sea, connecting earth with heaven. When incense was burned in the bowl, the smoke would emanate through the open work and shroud the mountain in intoxicating mists. Its fumes would transport and take the person contemplating in front of the censer on a visionary journey. When placed in a burial site, the meaning would be symbolic and imply the wish that the deceased might reach paradise or the islands and mountains where immortals dwell. For Taoists, rocks are essential elements of nature that possess spirit and life energy, also called life breath, qi, that pulses through the universe. Stones are perceived as the stem cells, the DNA of Chinese landscape. With its dynamically upward winding masses, perforations, weathered surface, and multiple viewpoints, this stone, on the left, embodies constant transformation through natural forces in space and time. Taihu stones, such as this example on the left, are limestones originally sourced from Lake Tai. Stones were, or rocks were collected, set up like sculptures in gardens, or installed on scholars' desks as miniature mountains for contemplation. The appreciation for rocks reached a peak during the 11th century when the scholar official Mi Fu bowed deeply in front of an imposing stone, addressing it reverently as Elder Brother Rock. And you see a painting of it on the right. This monumental landscape painting, Early Spring, by Guo Xi, on the left, is another image of the universe, spirited and animated by life energy, qi, that pulses through all nature. In China, landscape painting has been practiced for over 1.5 millennia. Mostly painted in monochrome ink, traditional Chinese landscape painting has a unique look, unfamiliar to the Western viewer. The illusion of space, depth, and distance is achieved through changes in ink tonality, open vistas, and high vantage points, so a bird's view perspective. while washes of ink present layers of mist. Without a vanishing point that directs the eye, the viewer can enter, roam, and rest freely on all levels of the picture. Yet, Chinese depictions of nature and landscape were never mere representations of the external world. The 5th century author of the first theoretical writing on Chinese landscape painting states, "Mountains and rivers have material existence, but also spiritual quality." Guoxi's Early Spring was painted in 1072, after a time of warfare and turmoil, during which artists began to paint idealized landscape scenes. In these images of the vast but orderly universe, tiny human figures play a subordinate role. The court painter Guoxi presents such a vision, but here he also presents the universe as imperial empire, and thus merges Taoist and Confucian principles in one. Guoxi was a leading court painter under Song Dynasty Emperor Shenzong, a ruler who introduced a time of hope for recovery from war and for national reconstruction. In Early Spring, a central mountain flanked by lower elevations shrouded in mist rises majestically to the top of the picture plane. The upwards winding mountain masses, the falling cascades of water, and the tiny figures suggest the dynamics of the natural forces that give the composition life and movement. However, Guoxi's Early Spring can also be read as an image of hope for a return to Confucian order and a prospering empire under a virtuous ruler. This is not only evident. This can also be read as an image of return to Confucian order and a prospering empire. And this can be seen in the title, which is called Early Spring, and that suggests rejuvenation. The artist himself once wrote, "In painting a landscape, one attends first to the great mountain, which is called the host peak. Once the host is fixed, one may proceed with the secondary mountains, near and far, large and small. In its domination, the entire region, the host, which is the central mountain here, is like a ruler among his subjects, a master among servants." This painting that merges Taoist and Confucian philosophy is a perfect segue for moving forward to Confucianism with its central themes of filial piety and the worship of ancestors. Filial piety is respecting and honoring the elders, in particular one's parents, which was seen by Confucius as a foundation for a stable and harmonious society and state. Confucius considered not the individual, but the family, the nucleus of society and state. The book, the classic of filial piety, is composed of 18 chapters. It takes the form of a dialogue between Confucius and his disciple Zhangzi on themes that have been illustrated in paintings. Among the most famous and earliest extant illustrations of the classics is this hand scroll by the 11th century scholar official Li Gonglin. I only will show you, it's a very long hand scroll, and I only will show you 3 scenes. This one is the first. This scene shows a son seated in the lower left corner, who, although a grown-up man, humbly entertains his parents with games and toys, illustrating the saying, In nourishing one's parents, a son's endeavor is to give them utmost pleasure, and he who serves his parents will be free from pride. Another chapter encourages ministers to respectful remonstrance and honest criticism of one's superior. The text says, in case of unrighteous conduct, a son must remonstrate with his father, and a minister with his ruler. And here you see a ruler sitting on his throne, and an official approaching him reverently and bringing forth some criticism. The last scene depicts ancestor worship, illustrating the statement, in the ancestor temple, a son manifests the utmost reverence, showing that he does not forget his parents. So you see a couple standing in front of ancestor tablets, little steles that have the names of the ancestors. And you see the vessels for the sacrifices. Here is a later painting illustrating ancestor worship and filial piety. It shows Zhu Maoshi worshipping his parents. His father had just died a year ago in summer. The painting shows his son Zhu kneeling and in mourning clothes on Qingmingjie, the day to remember the dead. Although Qingmingjie is observed in April, the painting shows a summer scene, the season when Zhu's father had died. The ancestor portrait on the wall shows his deceased father in court garment as a high official of the second rank, presumably with his two wives also in court robes. On the offering table, we see a set of utensils to burn incense, and Zhu holds a tray with scissors. The pair of scissors which he holds on the tray are an unusual motif. The sharp scissors are supposed to ward off evil ghosts that may approach the altar in the wake of the spirits of his ancestors. Let me conclude with architecture for state rituals as another instance through which interaction between heaven and earth, ruler and mankind, finds expression and can be understood. The heavenly terrace, Tiantan, in Beijing, an imperial sacrificial altar, is also called the Temple of Heaven and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Constructed under the Ming Dynasty Yongle Emperor in the year 1420, it is a place to make offerings to heaven. The Temple of Heaven covers an area of 273 hectares, which makes it the world's largest architectural complex dedicated to heavenly worship. The grounds are located outside the southern gate of the Forbidden City. Its overall design is square, while the elevated wooden architectural structures are round, reflecting the ancient belief that heaven is round and the earth square. The sacrifice to heaven was performed in the first place by the emperor himself as the Son of Heaven, who had received his mandate to rule from heaven. We know from records of the later Qing dynasty that the annual ceremony began the day before the winter solstice, when the emperor went from the Forbidden City along a route blocked from public view to the enclosure of the Temple of Heaven. Crossing the 360 meters long bridge of Cinnabar Steps, he spent the night fasting in the Hall of Abstinence. And you see on the map the Hall of Abstinence on the left side. It's this square on the left. 2 hours before daybreak, the emperor would dress in plum-colored robes and proceed towards the altar enclosure. Ascending the circular Mount altar, 3 terraces, symbols of earth, man, and heaven, he faced the supreme ruler of the universe in the form of a sacred tablet. He then observed the offerings being placed on the sacrificial furnace. He finally prostrated himself 9 times before the sacred tablets and made offerings of blue silk and jade discs. Both the blue color and the circular shape of the discs were symbols of heaven. And you can see on the right, this painting has such an elevated altar with a tent covered in yellow silk. If you look into the center of the tent, you see the ancestor tablet, or the tablets to the supreme ruler of the universe. And in front of this tablet is a table with offerings. And if you have good eyes, you can even see the sacrificial animals that are placed in front of this, the ancestor tablet, and in front of the altar. So the emperor would repeat this performance or ritual of kneeling and offering several times, and then the sacred tablets, which I just pointed out, was enshrined again, and the emperor would return to the palace, to the Forbidden City. This is, of course, a very brief version of a very, very complex and elaborate ritual. The architecture of the Hall of Prayer for Good Harvest, which you see on the left, on the grounds of the overall Temple of Heaven, is a masterpiece of wooden architecture, and likewise highly symbolic in all its features and colors. The circular shape of the building and its marble terraces, as well as the blue roof tiles, symbolize heaven. The main pillars in the interior hall, the main ones, the 4 red ones, represent the 4 seasons. The 8 flights of steps to the prayer hall outside stand for the 8 world directions, making the central upright building the world axis that connects heaven with earth. Last but not least, I want to show you this portrait of the Qianlong Emperor at the age of 26, which was painted by the Italian Jesuit Giuseppe Castiglione, who was a missionary and artist at the Chinese court in the mid-18th century. Castiglione's legacy and that of the Jesuit missionaries in China will be one of the subjects addressed in our upcoming seminar. I'm very much looking forward to this, and this will bring the presence of Christianity into the discussion, which happened when the first missionaries arrived in China in the 16th century, and then they have a history of 200 years and left a remarkable legacy in China. So with this, thank you for your attention.